Silver bit into Valentina's wrists with every step. The shackles had been polished for ceremony, engraved with curling moon vines, meant to look delicate against the white silk wrapped over her shoulders. Delicate didn't matter. Metal was still metal. It had already rubbed the skin raw above her pulse, and each jolt of the wagon axle sent another line of fire up her forearms. She kept her chin high anyway. The border road split two territories like a scar. Her birth pack's pine-dark hills behind her, Night Vale's black stone ridges ahead. Wolves lined both sides in ranked silence, some in armor, some in court finery, all pretending this was diplomacy and not surrender dressed in perfume. A herald rode beside the wagon and recited in a carrying voice, "By blood compact and winter accord, House Stormborn offers Valentina Stormborn in binding tribute to Night Vale, in exchange for cessation of hostilities and restoration of trade rights. Offers. Binding tribute." The words had been repeated so many times this week they had gone numb in her ears, but not in her body. Her wolf paced and slammed at her ribs, wild-eyed, snarling at the scent of strange territory and humiliation. Across from her, Lady Astrid Stormborn sat with perfect posture, gloved hands folded over a scroll tube sealed in red wax. Astrid's smile never reached her eyes. "You are trembling," Astrid murmured. "It's cold," Valentina said. "It's consequence." Valentina didn't answer. She had learned young that silence sometimes preserved what dignity defiance couldn't. Astrid tipped her head, studying her like a merchant inspecting horseflesh. "You should be grateful, cousin. Most failed heirs are discarded quietly. You, at least, are useful." A muscle jumped in Valentina's jaw. Failed heir. As if she had failed because raiders burned their outer villages while elders argued over succession. As if she had failed because men on councils trusted her battle plans in private and ignored them in public. As if she had failed because she was the easiest name to write on a treaty line. Ahead, Night Vale's gates rose out of the rock. Ironwood doors banded in obsidian and silver, carved with wolves and crescent moons. Spears crossed and uncrossed. The wagon rolled through. The crowd noise changed at once. Less fear, more curiosity, sharp and bright as broken glass. "There," someone called from a balcony. "The tribute bride." "Pretty thing." Stormborn thought they were taller. "She won't last first frost." Valentina fixed her gaze on the citadel keep and counted her breaths. 4 in, 4 out. Don't flinch. Don't give them your throat. The receiving court waited in the outer hall beneath hanging braziers that smelled of cedar resin and old smoke. Night Vale nobles stood in layered black and deep blue. Their alpha's throne at the raised end sat empty. No king to claim his tribute. A steward in silver-threaded robes stepped forward. "By authority of Night Vale Council, we accept the treaty gift." Gift. He did not look at her face when he said it. Astrid rose first as if she were the one being honored and presented the sealed scroll. "May this end bloodshed between our houses." The steward broke wax, skimmed, nodded. "Until spring session, the bride will remain under court custody." Bride had cost him effort. He gestured. 2 guards approached Valentina. One took her elbow as if she might bolt through 60 armed wolves. The other unlocked the wagon chain linking her ankle cuffs to the floor, then locked a new chain to the belt at her waist. Formal transfer complete. Astrid leaned in as Valentina was turned away. Her voice was velvet over knives. "Remember what I told you. Smile when commanded. Speak only when asked. If they bruise you, hide it. If they break you, break quietly." Valentina met her gaze then, finally. "Did you ever mean to fight for me?" Astrid looked almost amused. "I fought for the pack." Then she stepped back, and the guards marched Valentina down a side corridor toward guest quarters too ornate to be kind. Her room had no lock on the inside. Silk drapes, gilded mirrors, a carved bed, hot water already steaming in a copper basin, every luxury an accomplice to control. The window overlooked an inner courtyard 6 stories down. No balcony, no ivy, no chance. A handmaiden undid the silver cuffs only to replace them with thin ceremonial bracelets etched in moonscript. Lighter, but still enchanted. Valentina could feel the hum against her skin like trapped bees. "Will I be summoned to the council?" she asked. The maid kept her eyes down. "If required." "Where is your alpha?" Silence. When the maid left, the door shut with an audible latch from outside. Valentina stood in the center of the room, listening to nothing. No wind through pines, no familiar footsteps, no sister's laugh from across a training yard. Only distant music from below and the occasional bark of command in a dialect clipped differently than hers. She lasted exactly 10 minutes before she pressed both palms to the cold wall and let herself shake. Not cry. Shake. Her wolf scraped inside her chest, frantic with confinement. "Run," it demanded. "Run now." To where? The citadel was nested in enemy mountains. The treaty had made her body a border marker. If she ran and was caught, Stormborn would call it breach and let Nightvale punish her to prove compliance. By evening she was summoned to the High Gallery, where Nightvale's lesser nobles drank dark wine and traded gossip under crystal lamps. Valentina stood near a pillar while men and women appraised her like a new hunting blade. A broad-shouldered beta with wolf-teeth rings circled once and smirked. Stormborn silk. Did they include instruction manual? Laughter. Another woman, jeweled from throat to knuckles, said loudly, "Tribute brides are always so proud at first." "Winter teaches." "Winter kills," someone replied. Same result. Valentina kept her face still, but each word lodged like grit under skin. Near midnight, when she thought a dismissal might come, the same steward from earlier appeared at her side. "You will make yourself useful," he said. "The council requires reserve wine from the catacomb vaults. The lower servants are occupied with feast service." She blinked. "Now? Now." He handed her a bronze key on a black cord and a small lamp. "Third stairwell east, lowest level. Bring 2 casks marked with the king's seal." A king she had not seen. A vault under a fortress that wasn't hers, sent alone in silk and bracelets. This was no errand. This was a test. Or a joke. Or the first step of something worse. When she did not move fast enough, the steward's mouth flattened. "Do not mistake courtesy for lenience, Lady Tribute." The title hit like spit. Valentina dipped her head because defiance had nowhere to go and took the lamp. If she was a prisoner, she could still choose how she walked to the cell. She descended. The eastern stairwell narrowed with each turn, polished stone giving way to older blocks wet with mineral sweat. The music from above thinned to a muffled pulse, then vanished. Cold climbed through the soles of her slippers. Her lamp flame bent in drafts that smelled of dust, old wine, and something metallic beneath both. She passed niches filled with cracked urns, collapsed banners, and statues of winged figures whose faces had been deliberately chiseled away. At the bottom, a corridor stretched in 2 directions. She found the first vault easily. Iron grates, racks of casks, chalk marks in a cellar hand script. She located one barrel stamped with Nightvale's moon crest and rolled it onto a small hand cart. Then a second. She should have turned back. Instead, she heard it. Not a voice. Not exactly. A vibration like a plucked wire passing through bone. Her wolf froze, then surged forward so hard her vision blurred. The sound came from beyond the wine vault, down a side passage blocked by a chain curtain and a sigil-painted lintel. Warning script shone faintly in silver dust. "Sanctum. By celestial decree, no entry without priestly seal." Valentina's fingers tightened around the lamp handle. Her pulse knocked at her throat. Leave, reason said. But reason had marched her to a border in shackles and called it peace. She ducked under the chain curtain. The corridor beyond was older than the rest, carved straight through black bedrock. Runes crawled along both walls, thin lines of gold and white that pulsed like veins. At the end stood a bronze door taller than two men, covered in concentric circles of symbols she did not recognize, except for one repeated mark she'd seen in ruined chapels near the frontier, a spear through a halo. Angelic. The key from the steward grew hot against her palm. She shouldn't have had a key that fit this lock. That realization came an instant before curiosity and rage overruled caution. If they sent her down here to frighten her, let them learn she was difficult to frighten. She lifted the key. Metal clicked. Seals hissed. The runes flared. The door groaned inward. Cold hit first, brutal and clean. Then light. Hard white shafts from crystals set in the ceiling, revealing a circular chamber with carved pillars and old bloodstains dark as rust. In the center, fixed to a standing stone, was a man. No, an enormous male wolf in human shape, stripped to the waist, skin mapped with lash scars and old burns. His wrists were bound above shoulder height by chains that were not metal, but light made solid, braided strands of luminous script wrapping his forearms and chest. Similar bindings locked his ankles to the floor ring. Every breath pulled against them and made them glow brighter. His head hung forward, dark hair shadowing his face. Valentina took one involuntary step back. Then he lifted his head. Amber, no, molten gold, eyes found hers through the half-dark, shock and hunger and a terrible kind of fury crashing together in one glance. A scent slammed into her a heartbeat later, cedar smoke, iron and storm rain on hot stone. The world tilted. Her pulse stuttered. Her knees nearly gave. Her wolf came alive in a single violent rush, pressing against her skin, whining and clawing and reaching. Mate. The word detonated through her body like lightning. The chained male inhaled sharply as if struck by the same bolt. His claws scored grooves into the stone at his sides. The glowing bindings screamed, a high metallic shriek that rattled the chamber. No, he rasped, voice shredded and disbelieving. No, not you. Valentina could not breathe around the bond, around terror, around the impossible fact of him. The missing Alpha King of Nightvale, Theron Valewood, whispered dead for a year, stood before her in angel-forged chains, and her soul had already chosen him. Chosen him. The certainty was obscene. Valentina's fingers went numb around the lamp. Heat raced beneath her skin while the chamber air knifed cold through silk, her body unable to decide whether to burn or freeze. The pull between them tightened, low in her belly, behind her sternum, under every breath, an invisible cord jerking her forward 1 inch at a time. Theron bared his teeth, not at her, but at the chains. Light script seared brighter along his forearms, and the smell of scorched skin hit her a heartbeat before he made a sound. Don't. His voice came out rough enough to scrape stone. Do not come closer. Her wolf shoved hard against her bones, whining at the command, furious at him, at distance, at the whole impossible geometry of fate. Mine, it insisted. Mine and hurt and chained. Her throat closed. She swallowed and tried again. You're real. His laugh was a broken thing. Unfortunately. He looked worse the longer she stared. Fresh split skin at one shoulder where the runes bit deepest. Bruises yellowed into old green across his ribs. Starvation carved sharp planes along a body that should have carried easy power. Even so, there was nothing weak about him. He held himself like a blade stuck in a wall. Immobile, still dangerous. You're supposed to be dead, she whispered. I was supposed to stay a rumor. His gaze dropped to the bracelets on her wrists, then snapped back to her face. Stormborn. She nodded once. Recognition flared, then something more jagged. They sent you down here. Fetch wine, she said, and heard the hysteria trying to climb into her voice. She crushed it. If this is a test, I failed. Theron inhaled again, slower this time, as if scenting could tell him what eyes could not. The molten gold in his irises pulsed brighter. The mate bond answered with another violent surge, her pulse tripping over itself, nipples tightening under her bodice, thighs trembling with a want that had no business existing in a crypt full of bloodstains. Shame burned hot in her face. Fear burned hotter. Why are angelic runes on your chains? His jaw flexed. Because wolves forged from moonfire are hard to keep caged with iron. Another shriek tore from the bindings, thinner now, almost a harmonic whine. The symbols along his chest flashed and then, impossibly, mirrored the cadence of her heartbeat. Valentina flinched. They recognize you, he said, and the words were half wonder, half curse. Her hand moved before she could stop it, palm hovering over the nearest strand of light at his wrist. It looked like braided frost, beautiful and cruel. Valentina. Her name in his mouth felt like thunder rolling close. She touched the chain. Agony lanced up her arm. White heat, electrical and holy and vicious, bit straight through skin to bone. She cried out and jerked back, stumbling into the pillar behind her. The lamp swung wildly, throwing fractured shadows across his scars. Theron surged against his restraints with a snarl that shook dust from the ceiling. For one fractured instant she thought he might rip free. Then the upper binding snapped tight, forcing him back against the standing stone so hard his head struck with a crack. "Damn it," he hissed, breathing hard. "I told you not to." Valentina cradled her burned hand against her chest. Angry red welts rose across her palm where script had kissed her. Tears stung her eyes, from pain and fury, both. "You could have just let me learn quietly," she snapped. His mouth twitched despite everything, a ghost of savage humor. "I'm in no mood to watch my mate catch fire." The word hit harder than the burn. Mate. Not a question, not denied. Claimed in the middle of ruin, like speaking it made him vulnerable, and he did it anyway. Their eyes locked and held. The world narrowed to gold irises and the thread pulling between them. She could feel his hunger and restraint like two wolves sharing one skin. He could feel her terror, of court, of chains, of wanting what would destroy her. And still his expression gentled by a fraction, as if he was trying to hold all that fear without touching her. Footsteps echoed faintly far up the corridor. Valentina started. The wine casks. The steward. If she was missing too long, Theron heard it too. His face shuddered into command. "Go. Now. I can't just... Go," he repeated lower, and this time the edge of Alpha threaded the word. Power rolled over her, instinctively bowing muscle to will. Her wolf bristled, resentful but obedient to strength. Valentina backed toward the door, unable to look away until the bronze edge cut him from view. At the threshold she stopped. "What did they do to you?" she asked. His answer came after a beat. "Tried to make a king into a cautionary tale." "Who?" "Ask your cousin." Ice slid down her spine. "Astrid?" "Go, Valentina." She ran. The sanctum door slammed shut behind her with a booming finality. She shoved the key back into her bodice, grabbed the cart handle with shaking hands, and hauled both wine casks through the passages as fast as silk would let her move. By the time she reached the upper stair, her lungs burned, her palm throbbed, and her life had split cleanly into before and after a pair of gold eyes in the dark. She did not sleep. The burn on her hand had blistered by dawn. She wrapped it in torn linen before the maid arrived, claiming clumsiness with hot kettle water. The maid pretended to believe her. When the corridor quieted after noon bells, Valentina stole a water skin from a sideboard and a jar of comfrey salve from the healer's cabinet outside the guest wing. Every theft felt absurdly easy, as if the citadel still read her as harmless. By dusk, she was back at the eastern stairwell with the lamp hooded and her heart trying to fracture her ribs. The key turned more smoothly this time. The chamber smelled of blood and cedar. Theron was awake, head bowed, breath measured in the way of someone rationing pain. "You came back," he said without looking up. "I brought water." "Why?" The honest answer slipped out before strategy could choke it. "Because you were thirsty." He lifted his face then, and exhaustion softened the hard lines into something almost young. "That is not a court answer. I'm not in court. Thank the moon." She crossed to him slowly, set the water skin on a stone ledge, and held it up. "Can you drink?" He nodded toward his right side. "There's enough slack if I lean." There was barely enough. Valentina had to step between his arms, close enough to feel heat radiating off his skin. The bond crackled alive, electric under her scarred palm. She tipped the skin carefully against his mouth. He drank in slow swallows, never once letting his lips brush her fingers. When he finished, she uncorked the salve. "Your shoulder is split. It'll close. It's infected." His nostrils flared at her tone. Then, unexpectedly, he turned his face away from her and fixed his gaze on the far wall. The movement was deliberate, so she wouldn't feel watched. Something in her chest pulled tight. "You don't have to—" "I know." His voice was hoarse, quieter than before. "Do it anyway." Valentina dipped 2 fingers into comfrey and laid it along the torn skin beneath the rune line. He hissed once through his teeth but didn't move. Up close, she could see where older lashes crossed newer burns, layers of punishment written over each other. "Who lashes a king?" she murmured. "The kind of men who need everyone to forget he's a king." She worked in silence for a while. Her burned hand shook. He noticed and shifted subtly to ease his weight off the chain nearest her. When she reached for the glowing binding at his forearm, he said, "Stop." She froze. "Not there. You'll blister again." He flexed his wrist as far as the script allowed and tapped a tiny break in the rune braid, almost invisible unless the light hit sideways. 2 fingers. "Press into that seam first. It dampens the ward for a few breaths." "You could have said that yesterday." "You touched before I could." "Fair." She pressed where he indicated. The chain flickered from white to pale blue, and the violent heat ebbed to a tolerable thrum. Awe widened through her despite herself. "They left you a weakness," she said. "They assumed no one would care enough to look." Valentina met his gaze then. "I looked." His expression changed. Minute, but real. Not triumph. Not possessive certainty. Relief. Raw and startled, as if he had forgotten what kindness felt like. "Thank you," he said. No courtier had ever thanked her for tending wounds. They expected. They ordered. They criticized. Thanks landed like a hand offered over a chasm. A draft slipped through the chamber, cold enough to raise gooseflesh down her arms. She tried not to shiver and failed. Theron noticed instantly. He shifted again, as much as chains permitted, angling his body to block the draft from the doorway. Warmth rolled over her in a broad shield of living heat. She stared up at him. "You're freezing," he said, as if this were obvious and unremarkable. "You're chained to a rock." "And still warmer than you?" A small, unwilling laugh escaped her. It startled both of them. They held each other's gaze for a long beat, the bond no longer a violent yank but a steady current, dangerous and strangely calming all at once. When she finally stepped back, he spoke before she could turn. "Valentina." She waited. "If they ask where you were, tell them you got lost in the lower vaults and cried." Her brows rose. "Cried?" "Men like your steward only understand 2 versions of women, decorative and frightened. Be whichever keeps you alive." "You forgot furious." A flash of teeth. No, I'm counting on Furious. She gathered the empty water skin, recapped the salve, and hesitated at the door. I'll come back. His eyes closed briefly, like the words hurt. You shouldn't. I know. She left anyway. The feast hall blazed with candlelight and politics. 2 nights later, after one more stolen visit, one more wrapped burn hidden beneath lace cuffs, Valentina stood at the edge of the crescent table while musicians scraped out a winter reel no one listened to. The air smelled of roasted venison, wax, and the sharp metallic tang of anticipation. Astrid had arrived that afternoon with 3 stormborn elders, and smiles sharpened to points. Now she sat beside Night Vale's steward, as if she had always belonged there, goblet in hand, eyes bright with calculation. My cousin adapts beautifully, Astrid said to the hall, not bothering to lower her voice. Though Stormborn custom requires tribute brides formally acknowledge rank before allied alphas, a small kneeling rite. Surely Night Vale honors tradition. A lesser alpha across the table, Lord Brecken, heavy with rings and self-importance, grinned. We can be gracious. Valentina went still. There had been no mention of any kneeling rite in treaty script. The steward smiled thinly. Lady Valentina, approach. Every gaze in the hall pinned her as she stepped onto the central mosaic. Wolves shifted in their seats, scenting tension. At the edge of the dais, a servant presented a ceremonial collar of braided silver links. Her wolf erupted, slamming teeth first at her restraint. Astrid's voice floated soft and lethal. Kneel, cousin. Show them Stormborn keeps its bargains. Valentina looked from the collar to Astrid. The treaty says nothing about collared submission. It says custody, Astrid replied. Do not quibble over language you no longer have standing to interpret. A murmur of approval moved through Astrid's allies. Brecken rose, collar in hand. On your knees, tribute. Valentina did not move. Brecken's smile vanished. Kneel. He reached for her throat. The hall doors exploded inward. Silence crashed down so hard even the musicians stopped mid-note. Theron Valewood strode across the threshold trailing broken lengths of luminous chain, bare forearms marked with fresh rune burns, old scars stark in the candlelight. He wore black trousers and no insignia, as if kingship had been stripped to muscle and fury, but power poured off him in waves that made the nearest nobles instinctively lean back. Gold eyes locked on Brecken's hand at Valentina's neck. Touch her, Theron said, voice low enough to shake glass, and I remove the arm. For one stunned heartbeat, no one moved. Then voices erupted. Impossible. He's alive. Guards! The steward went pale as parchment. Astrid did not pale. She narrowed her eyes like a strategist recalculating a board. Brecken recovered first, sneering. You have no seat here, Wraith. Theron kept walking. I built this hall. 2 guards rushed him from the right. He hit the first in the sternum hard enough to fold armor, pivoted, and flung the second into a table without breaking stride. Wine exploded across the stone. Brecken shoved Valentina aside and lunged, grabbing for the collar chain like a weapon. Theron caught his wrist mid-swing and twisted once. A wet pop cracked through the hall. Brecken screamed, dropping to one knee clutching a dislocated wrist. Theron released him like refuse and stepped between Valentina and the room, placing her behind his shoulder with a backward sweep of his arm that was protective, not possessive. Space made for her, not over her. His voice rang now, full alpha command layered with something older. By King's Law of Night Vale, sworn under First Moon and Blood Rock, no mated wolf may be collared, traded, or compelled to kneel before lesser rank. The words struck like hammer blows. Several older nobles flinched on instinct, memories of law drilled before politics got convenient. Astrid stood, smooth and composed. A convenient claim from a man declared dead. Theron did not look at her. declared missing by forged vote while I was chained beneath my own keep. A hiss swept the room. Valentina felt every eye swing to her, then to the raw rune marks on Theron's wrists, then back to Astrid. The steward stammered, If a mate bond exists, priestly verification is required. Then fetch priests, Theron said, and fetch the original law tablets while you're done pretending ignorance. Brecken, face gray with pain, spat at the floor. She is treaty property. The snarl that tore from Theron was more wolf than human. Say property again. No one volunteered. Theron glanced back at Valentina, quick and sharp. In that single look, she caught the strain under his posture, the tiny tremor in his left hand, the way the glowing chain fragment at his ankle pulsed brighter each second. He had not escaped cleanly. He had forced this appearance on will and rage alone. He shouldn't have come. He came anyway. Something in her, hard, defensive, hoarded, shifted. She stepped out from behind him so they stood side by side. I do not kneel to men who buy women with parchment, she said, voice carrying farther than she expected. If Night Vale intends to honor law, cite it in full. If it intends to break law, say so plainly, and stop dressing it as custom. A crackle of shocked whispers followed. Astrid's smile thinned. Careful, cousin. Treason is an ugly color. Valentina met her gaze. So is cowardice. Theron's shoulder brushed hers, brief and steadying. He addressed the hall without raising volume, which somehow made it more dangerous. Challenge me if you dispute her standing. Any alpha? Here. No one moved. Not because they were loyal, because they were calculating odds, and even half-starved, half-bound, scarred to the bone, Theron still looked like a storm about to choose where it landed. At last, the oldest counselor present, a silver-haired she-wolf with ritual tattoos on both hands, rose slowly. Until priestly verification, kneeling rite is suspended, she said, collar removed. The servant set the silver links down as if they had bitten him. Theron inclined his head once, acknowledgement without gratitude. Then the chain at his ankle flared white-hot. He stiffened. Just for a second. Long enough for Valentina to feel panic lance through the bond. He leaned toward her, voice pitched for her alone. They'll drag me back in a moment. Her heart kicked hard. Then don't go. A shadow of a smile, fierce and tired. Not tonight's choice, little storm. Hands closed around his upper arms. 4 guards this time, warded gauntlets sparking where they touched the glowing script. Theron did not resist. Not here, not with her exposed in the center of a volatile hall. As they pulled him backward toward the doors, he kept his eyes on Valentina until distance, and bodies cut the line between them. The hall noise surged back in fractured waves. Valentina stood straight amid overturned goblets and blood on stone, pulse pounding, her throat still uncollared. For the first time since crossing the border, she did not feel like cargo. She felt like someone worth going to war for, and, more terrifyingly, someone ready to fight back. The hall did not recover so much as fracture into factions. Brecken was carried out cursing. 2 counselors shouted over precedent. Servants knelt to mop wine and blood from the mosaic where Valentina had been ordered to kneel. Above it all, Astrid stood with perfect posture and watched every face in the room like she was taking inventory of a battlefield. When the last witnesses drifted into whispering knots, Astrid lifted her goblet toward Valentina in a mock toast. Walk with me, cousin. It wasn't a request. Valentina followed her into a narrow gallery behind the feast dais, where stained-glass saints cast moon-blue light over stone. No guards, no servants, just the 2 of them and the echo of distant argument. Astrid set her goblet on a windowsill. You've become inconvenient faster than expected. Valentina folded her arms to hide the tremor in her burned hand. You chained a king under his own citadel and call me inconvenient? Astrid smiled faintly. I did not chain him. I merely recognized an opportunity and refused to waste it. By helping whoever did. By helping the future? Astrid corrected. Theron was always a liability. Wild. Revered. Impossible to govern. Men like him conquer beautifully and rule badly. He invoked law tonight. You invoked a collar. Because law is only useful when people still fear it. Astrid leaned in, voice dropping to silk over steel. Listen carefully. Night Vale is split. Stormborn is broke and bleeding. Border packs are one hard winter from cannibal raids. This realm does not need romance. It needs structure. Valentina held her stare. And you, conveniently, are structure. I am competent. Astrid drew a scroll tube from inside her sleeve and cracked the seal with her thumb. Inside, parchment shimmered with silver script and a priestly sunburst stamp. Another followed. Then another. Celestial decrees. Valentina's stomach turned cold. Astrid let her read enough words to understand. Bloodline contamination, angel-cursed inheritance, nullification of lunar mating compacts under divine exception. Legal language, weaponized. You forged those, Valentina said. Please, I commissioned them. Astrid re-rolled the parchments. Priests can be persuaded, especially when celestial envoys remind them where their authority actually comes from. A draft stirred the candles. For one irrational second, Valentina smelled ozone and myrrh, the same knife-clean scent that had clung to Theron's runes. Envoys, she repeated. Astrid's expression sharpened with satisfaction at the fear she saw. You didn't think wolves built those chains, did you? Valentina's nails bit her palms. Astrid continued. Here is what happens next. At tomorrow night's moon oath, before court and clergy, you will publicly denounce the mating claim as corruption and affirm your treaty status. The priests will declare the bond void. Theron returns to sanctum custody under celestial seal. I am appointed regent until a stable succession is arranged. You mean until you take both packs? I mean until someone adult is in charge. Valentina laughed once harshly. You sold us to angels for a crown. Astrid's mask slipped for the first time, something raw and old flashing under polish. I was promised that crown when we were children. I did everything right. I learned law, command, diplomacy. I kept Stormborn solvent while your uncle drank tribute taxes and called it strategy. Then a feral war hero vanished, and a sentimental treaty sent me you in silk shackles to clean up everyone else's incompetence. Her voice cut back to calm. Do not confuse ambition with villainy, cousin. I am trying to prevent collapse. By making slavery permanent. By ending the illusion that softness survives. Footsteps approached at the far end of the gallery. Astrid stepped back into composure before the steward appeared with two priest attendants in white and gold. Lady Valentina, the steward said briskly, by council order, you are confined to East Tower chambers pending moon oath adjudication. Astrid adjusted one glove. Do rest. You'll need your voice clear when you renounce him. Valentina looked at her and saw it all at once. Not tantrum, not jealousy. Architecture. Bribes routed through temples. Laws rewritten at candlelit desks. A woman willing to chain kings and bury brides if the ledger balanced in her favor. Dangerous, not because she raged, but because she planned. The priests took Valentina by the elbows and led her away. East Tower confinement came with embroidered pillows, barred windows, and 3 rotating guards at the door. By dawn, copies of celestial decrees had appeared on every public notice board in the citadel. Servants carried gossip like coals, stormborn blood tainted by angel war, mate bond contamination, divine exemption. By noon, no one met Valentina's eyes. By afternoon, a priest with saffron tattoos pressed a thumb to her forehead and muttered over a bowl of smoking resin while two scribes recorded her pulse as if she were livestock under quarantine. "Do you hear voices?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Yours. Constantly." He did not appreciate humor. At second bell, another delegation arrived with moonstone chains for ritual safety. She refused to hold out her wrists until the guard captain threatened sedation. She gave them her wrists and memorized every face in the room. Pressure tightened from all sides, mechanical and precise. Isolate, discredit, reframe. At dusk, rain began, hard winter rain that rattled the shutters and soaked the courtyards black. A kitchen girl left her supper tray untouched outside the door, eyes wide and frightened. Under the bread cloth lay a folded scrap of linen with one line written in charcoal. "Third stair east, midnight, alone, no signature." Valentina burned the cloth in her candle flame, ground the ash into the wash basin, and waited through 2 guard shifts with her pulse drumming in her throat. At midnight, when thunder shook the tower and the corridor torches sputtered, she faked a fainting spell, spilled broth over herself, and demanded clean linens in her best offended noble voice. While the youngest guard cursed and fetched a maid, she slipped through the service hatch behind the wardrobe she'd found that morning and dropped into a laundry shaft that dumped into the lower storerooms. By the time alarm bells started above, she was already on the eastern stairwell with a stolen lamp and rainwater dripping from her hem. The sanctum door opened before she could lift the key. Theron stood inside the threshold as far as his ankle chain allowed, chest heaving. The luminous tether from his leg to the standing stone blazed like a lightning strike, stretched near snapping. "You weren't supposed to come," he said. "You sent the note." "I sent warning." His gaze flicked over her face, wrists, throat, as if checking for injuries by scent and sight both. "They've posted decrees." "I've seen." "They'll try to force oath under priest witness." "They already are." A muscle flexed in his jaw. "I can feel them working the wards. They're tightening for transfer." The bond hummed hot and raw between them. Attraction knotted with fear. In the storm-muted chamber, every inhale tasted of him, cedar and iron and the rain still clinging to her skin. Her wolf pushed forward, desperate to close distance, to press against him, to erase chains with body heat and teeth. She stepped nearer until the blue edge of wardlight kissed her bare ankles. "Then we break transfer." He laughed once without humor. "With what army?" "With whatever survives poor planning." She lifted her wrapped palm. "I've been learning your chains." His eyes dropped to the bandage. Something fierce and pained moved through his expression. "Valentina." "No." Her voice shook and held anyway. "You came into that hall half dead because they were about to collar me. Don't ask me to sit in a tower while they bury you again." Silence stretched, full of rain and rune hum. Then he nodded once, accepting what he could not command away. "Tomorrow's moon oath is the hinge. They need witnesses. They need you compliant in public." "Or dead in public." "Exactly." She leaned her shoulder against the stone pillar nearest him, close enough that heat from his skin reached her. "I'm afraid," she admitted, the words dragged out by exhaustion and honesty. "Not of dying. Of being turned into proof. Of them making me kneel and calling it order." Theron's expression went very still. "I won't let that happen." "You may not get a vote." "Then I'll make one." At the corridor mouth, a bell clanged once, distant, searching. Valentina exhaled slowly. "I have to go before they seal the tower." He reached toward her on instinct. The chain at his wrist flared, and he stopped with his fingers inches from her cheek, shaking from restraint. The space between their skin burned hotter than touch. "Little storm," he said low, "whatever they put in your mouth tomorrow, do not swear it from your heart. Oaths, spoken under duress, still stain." She nodded. As she turned to leave, he added, "If they bring priests with myrrh and iron ash, don't breathe deep. It dulls wolf instinct." She looked back. "How do you know that?" His smile was all blade. "I've had practice being handled." She went up the stairs with his scent in her lungs and a plan beginning to sharpen around terror. The next night, moonrise painted the citadel silver and cruel. They dressed her in ceremonial white. Not bridal white. Sacrificial white, sheer at the sleeves, too thin for winter stone. A priest braided her hair tight enough to ache and fastened a crescent diadem over her brow. Another painted sigils along her collarbones in diluted ash that stung like nettles. "Purification marks," he said when she flinched. "Branding," she answered. He avoided her eyes. Through the cracked chapel doors, she could see the oath chamber filling. Nobles in winter black, clergy in gold, the council ring lit by moonfire braziers. At the center stood an altar spear set upright in a cradle of stone, the moon-forged relic used for sovereign vows. Astrid waited beside it in storm-gray velvet, a regent's clasp at her shoulder already, as if the outcome were administrative. When Valentina entered under guard, murmur rolled across the chamber like surf. The high priest raised both hands. "Under celestial witness and pack law, we convene moon oath adjudication concerning disputed mating claim and treaty custody." Disputed. Custody. Language as leash. Valentina was placed inside a chalked circle facing the assembly. Her wrists were bound in ceremonial chains that looked like jewelry until she tested them and felt ward shock bite. The priest began recitation. "State your name and blood." "Valentina Stormborn." "State your status." She kept her chin up. "Unbroken." A hiss of disapproval. Astrid stepped forward before the priest could correct procedure. "Cousin, don't embarrass yourself. We can still do this cleanly." Valentina stared at her. "There is no clean way to sell a kingdom." Astrid's mouth thinned. She lifted one hand, and acolytes dragged in a chained figure from the side transept. Theron. He was on his feet, barely. New runes blazed across his throat and chest, brighter and more invasive than before, threaded with gold filaments that crawled like living wire under skin. Two celestial wardens stood behind him, tall, masked in beaten silver, wings of articulated metal folded at their backs. Not angels, not human, something between law and weapon. The room went colder. Theron found Valentina instantly. Even exhausted, even bleeding, his gaze was a command and a plea all at once. "Hold." Astrid's voice carried, clear and merciless. "To ensure sincerity, the accused king attends. If Lady Valentina renounces the false bond, he is remanded to sanctum. If she refuses, both are condemned for treason under celestial covenant." The high priest hesitated, then nodded as if this had always been the script. "Proceed." A scribe unrolled the oath parchment. "Repeat. I, Valentina Stormborn, reject unlawful mating corruption and submit my person to treaty authority and regent oversight." "No," Theron said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The warden struck him to his knees with staves of white fire. The smell of burned air ripped through the chamber. Valentina lunged. Her chain snapped her back into the chalk circle. Rage washed clean through fear. Astrid turned to her, eyes bright. "Say the words." Valentina said nothing. Astrid took one measured step closer. "If you force this into spectacle, I will have them reopen every border tribute ledger and fill your place with 10 girls younger than you. You can die principled or live useful. Choose." For one heartbeat, the chamber narrowed to Astrid's gloved hand resting on the altar rail, on the heavy obsidian signet ring stamped with Stormborn's wolf and lightning crest. The same crest that still carried her aunt's old command clearances in lower vault systems. The same kind of authorization that might open more than chapel doors. A plan flashed fully formed and insane. Valentina dropped her gaze, let her shoulders fold as if finally broken. Relief flickered across Astrid's face. Wise? Astrid murmured, leaning in. Valentina moved. She stumbled forward like she was losing balance, caught Astrid's wrist for support, and in the same motion twisted, palming the obsidian signet free with her bound fingers. Astrid gasped, more startled than hurt, but Valentina was already sagging to one knee, hiding the ring in the fall of her sleeve. "Stand her up!" Astrid snapped, recovering instantly. Guards hauled Valentina upright. The scribe raised the oath scroll again. Outside, the moon oath bells began to toll, each strike vibrating through stone into bone. Critical moment. Witnesses assembled. Theron bleeding under celestial staves, Astrid watching for the slightest defiance, and against Valentina's pulse, hidden under silk and chain, a stolen signet dug into her skin like a promise. Acolytes tightened their grip on Valentina's arms. "Repeat the oath," the scribe said, voice trembling at the edges. "I, Valentina Stormborn, reject—" Wait. The word came from the high priest this time, sharp with ritual authority. He lifted his staff, moon bells chiming at its crown. Celestial protocol requires movement. The denouncement must be sealed before the sanctum witness and returned to the oath chamber at moon apex. Of course it did. Astrid inclined her head, perfectly calm. Then we proceed. Theron was yanked upright by the warden's staves. He swayed once, blood at the corner of his mouth, then steadied on sheer will. The runes crawling his chest pulsed in frantic patterns that made Valentina's own skin prickle. The procession formed quickly, priests first, chanting, then the wardens with Theron between them, then Astrid and the council ring, then Valentina in ceremonial chains, bracketed by guards. As they moved into the narrow transept, moonfire from the braziers guttered in drafts and shadows warped along the carved saints. Rain hammered the roof overhead. Bells tolled again, each strike like a countdown. Valentina kept her head bowed and her thoughts knife clear. Signet hidden, wrists bound, 2 guards close, one inattentive, one brutal. Left side corridor at the 3rd pillar led to storage stairs. She'd seen it when they brought her in. "Mine," her wolf growled, scenting Theron's blood in the cold air. "Hold," she answered silently. "Just one more turn." They reached the 3rd pillar. Valentina stumbled hard, pitching sideways into the nearest brazier stand. Coals spilled, sparks erupting across the rush-strewn floor. A priest shrieked as his robes caught at the hem. Guards lunged toward flame, cursing. She moved. One twist, shoulder under the inattentive guard's arm. One heel strike to the brutal guard's knee. One savage yank of her chained wrists through the slack while they were off balance. Pain flashed white across her palms, but the chain loop slipped free. "Stop her!" someone shouted. Valentina dove through the side corridor, silk tearing on rough stone, and ran. Behind her, uproar, boots. Astrid's voice like a whip. "After her!" Then drowned by the crash of another toppled brazier. The storage stairs spiraled down into wet dark. She flew down it half blind, one hand on the wall, the other clamped over the signet hidden in her sleeve. Her lungs burned. Her braid slapped her spine with every step. Above, pursuit split in 2 directions. She heard one squad continue after the procession route, another peel toward her stair. Good. Confusion bought seconds. At the bottom, she hit the old corridor at a sprint, ducked beneath the chain curtain, and slammed Astrid's signet against the sanctum lock plate. Nothing. "No, no, no!" She turned the ring, crest inward, and rammed it again into a tiny wolf head indentation she hadn't noticed before. The bronze door shuddered. Runes flared gold, then bled to red. The lock clicked. Valentina shoved through and shouldered the door behind her just as fists pounded on the far side. Theron jerked against the standing stone, eyes blazing at the sight of her. "What did you do?" "Started a fire," Stole a ring. Improvised. The luminous chains around him had doubled. Intricate angelic script braided over old wolf law, pulsing in time with the chapel bells. Near the base, a fresh lock script had been inked in silver across the stone. 6 concentric circles, each keyed to celestial signatures. She dropped to her knees at the base, dragging the signet across the circles. No response. Outside, metal rang against bronze. They were bringing tools. Theron's voice sharpened. Valentina, look at me. Those are blood-sealed. Signet won't open them. Then what will? His gaze flicked to her split, burned palm. Yours might. You touched the chains. They recognized your line. She didn't hesitate. She bit open the heel of her hand, hissed at the pain, and pressed blood over the innermost ring. Red smeared silver. The script writhed, resisted, then began to reconfigure, symbols collapsing and rewriting in jagged strokes she did not know, but somehow understood. Overwrite accepted. Secondary witness pending. The phrase flashed in her head like someone else had spoken inside her skull. Again, Theron said. She smeared more blood across the second ring, then the third. Each one fought harder, the ward light lashing her wrists with electric heat. Her vision blurred. Sweat chilled down her spine. Outside the door, a voice roared, "Stand clear!" Valentina slammed her bleeding palm over the final circle and shouted the only claim she trusted. "By blood untraded and bond unbroken, I choose him." The lock script detonated in white light. Every chain on Theron's body went slack at once. He tore free with a snarl that was almost a sob, stumbling forward as sensation crashed back into starved limbs. Valentina barely caught him before he hit the floor. He was so heavy, so hot, so real. The sanctum door buckled inward. "Move!" she gasped. Theron threw one arm over her shoulders, and together they staggered through the side exit passage, the one she had mapped from memory after stolen visits. Behind them, the bronze door crashed open and warded guards flooded the chamber too late. They emerged not into safety but into the rear of the Oath transept, just as the procession was reforming in chaos around the extinguished braziers. Priests shouted. Nobles clustered. Astrid stood on the steps above them, face icy with disbelief, as she saw Theron unchained. Valentina did not run for the outer gate. She hauled Theron straight toward the center of the Oath chamber. "Stop them!" Astrid screamed. No one moved fast enough. Valentina mounted the first altar step, blood dripping from her hand onto white ceremonial silk, and ripped a scroll tube from Astrid's own belt as she passed. Silver-capped, sunburst sealed, hidden under regent velvet. Astrid lunged, missed. Valentina snapped the seal and unrolled the parchment with shaking fingers. The script shimmered in moon ink and angel cipher. She had seen enough in the gallery to recognize structure. Now, with Theron's weight braced against her shoulder and the whole court staring, she read aloud. "Covenant of Interim Celestial Stewardship," she shouted, voice ringing off stone. Clause 1. Upon delivery of designated female carrier, me, to wardens for transference, claimant Astrid Stormborn shall be installed regent over Nightvale and Stormborn territories. Clause 2. Alpha Theron Valewood to remain bound indefinitely as prophetic hazard. Clause 3. Tribute system expanded under ecclesial oversight for border compliance. A wave of sound crashed through the chamber. Outrage, denial, fear. Astrid's voice cut through it. "Forgery!" Valentina held the pact high. "Signed with your blood, your seal, and witness marks from the celestial envoys you swore did not exist." Theron straightened beside her, swaying but deadly. "Counsel, look at the signature line." The silver-haired counselor from the feast pushed forward, snatched the scroll, and scanned. Her face went hard as carved slate. "It's hers." The celestial wardens descended from the clear-story arches then, 3 this time, wings of articulated steel unfolding with a scream of gears and light. Spears of white fire leveled at Theron and Valentina. The chamber recoiled. Valentina's pulse thundered. Fear punched through her so hard her knees nearly gave. Then her eyes caught the altar relic. The moon-forged spear, upright in its cradle. She stepped forward, seized it with both hands and yanked it free. The shaft vibrated like struck metal. Moonlight raced along etched runes, recognizing blood and will. Valentina planted the spear butt on the stone between Theron and the descending wardens with a crack that split one altar tile. "By pack law of sovereign challenge," she shouted, voice raw and huge in her own ears. "No celestial claim supersedes blood-right judgment while the moon spear stands and witness holds. I invoke challenge against Astrid Stormborn for treason, unlawful bondage, and sale of pack blood." Silence hit like impact. Even the wardens paused, as if old law had snagged their programming. Astrid went white with fury. "You don't have standing." Theron bared bloodied teeth. "She does as my mate. She does as wronged blood. She does because she dared when all of you hid behind parchment." The spear hummed brighter. Challenge accepted. The moonfire braziers whispered in unison, flame turning silver blue. Now there was no procedural retreat, no quiet burial in catacombs, only trial by witness truth. Astrid's eyes flicked around the room and found no immediate rescue, so she chose violence. With a hiss, she drew a slim ceremonial dagger from her garter sheath and lunged up the steps toward Valentina, shouting, "Tribute wolves do not become queens, only bargaining chips." Valentina pivoted on instinct and training. She sidestepped the blade, trapped Astrid's knife wrist under her forearm, and twisted down and out exactly as her old weapons master had drilled into muscle memory. The dagger clattered across stone. Astrid hissed and tried to rake Valentina's face with her free hand. Valentina drove an elbow into her sternum and forced her to her knees before the assembly. Astrid spat blood and fury. "Get off me." Valentina locked the wrist harder until Astrid winced. "Face them!" Theron stepped down one stair, voice like winter iron. "Project the scroll." The high priest hesitated. Theron's gold gaze snapped to him. "Now." Shaking, the priest thrust his staff over the parchment. Moonfire leapt, enlarging the text in burning script across the chapel vault. Clause by clause it blazed overhead for every noble, guard, and servant to read. Gasps turned to shouts. "Indefinite binding?" She offered border daughters. "Regency by celestial appointment? That voids pack sovereignty." Brecken, arm in a sling at the edge of the crowd, stared up at the words and went sickly gray. Astrid stopped struggling and laughed once, breathless and bitter. "Yes, I did it. I did what none of you had the spine to do." Her voice rose, carrying to the rafters. "You wanted peace, tribute, obedience, no messy war at your doors. I gave you a structure that would hold. You would have thanked me in 10 years. Valentina met her eyes. "You sold us all for a crown." Astrid bared her teeth. "I was owed that crown." Theron answered before anyone else could. "You were owed justice." He looked to the council ring. "Verdict." The silver-haired counselor stepped forward, hand lifted in formal sign. One by one, other council members mirrored her, some furious, some shaken, none abstaining. "Treason affirmed," she said, "by attempted usurpation, unlawful celestial covenant, and violation of king's law. Astrid Stormborn is stripped of rank, title, and claim." Astrid's chin came up. "You can't exile me. Stormborn needs me." A new voice answered from the side aisle. Old, cracked, unmistakably Stormborn. One of the elders Astrid had brought, now ashen and trembling. "Stormborn needs to survive you." Guards advanced with ceremonial chains. Astrid fought then. Really fought. Kicking, clawing, cursing in two dialects as they bound her wrists in the same silver links meant for Valentina. As they dragged her toward the outer doors, she twisted to scream over her shoulder, eyes blazing at both of them. "This realm will burn without me. Then we'll build from ash," Valentina said. The great gates opened to stormwind and black night beyond. Exile horns sounded once. Astrid's final scream echoed down the stair as the gate slammed and iron bolts dropped. The wardens, deprived of contract claimant and challenged understanding moon law, folded their metallic wings and retreated upward into the dark vaulting like condemned stars going out. For the first time all night, no one in the chamber gave an order. Theron swayed beside Valentina, color draining from his face now that fury had spent itself. She dropped the spear and caught him as his knees buckled. "Easy," she whispered. His forehead rested briefly against hers, breath rough. "Still choosing me?" She tightened her grip, always when it costs. They brought no procession to the chapel above the catacombs, only dawn. Rain had broken in the last hour. The sky through the shattered rose window was pearl and silver, light spilling over broken icons and cracked saints whose faces had long ago been chiseled away. Someone had lit 2 small candles at the ruined altar and left clean water, linen, and privacy. For once, the citadel understood reverence. Theron sat on the chapel steps shirtless, fresh bandages crossing old scars, his dark hair still damp from the wash basin. The rawest rune burns had been salved, but not hidden. He looked exhausted, dangerous, and startlingly young when he wasn't braced for battle. Valentina stood a pace away in a plain wool shift and cloak, ceremonial paint scrubbed off, wrists bare for the first time since the border crossing. The absence of metal felt almost louder than bells. Neither spoke for a while. The bond between them had changed since the spear challenge. No longer a jagged pull, but a deep current, warm and insistent, flowing under every breath. In the quiet, she could feel his emotions brush hers in faint impressions. Relief edged with disbelief, hunger wrapped around restraint, fear that she would still walk away, now that she could. He looked up at her, gold eyes steady. "I need to ask before instinct takes more than permission." She stepped closer. "Ask." His voice went rough. "If you mark with me, there is no political retreat. You won't be tribute, but you'll be target. Every enemy I have will count your heartbeat with mine." Valentina knelt in front of him so they were level. "I was a target the day they put me in silk shackles." She lifted her chin, exposing the junction of neck and shoulder where her pulse beat fast. "This is not trade. This is choice." Something in him eased and tightened at once. "Mine?" he whispered, not as command but wonder. She touched his jaw with her fingertips. "Yours, if you are mine." His eyes flashed molten. "Mate." The word rolled through the bond like distant thunder. Theron drew a breath, then did something no king in any story had ever done for her. He bared his throat first, tipping his head back to expose the vulnerable line of his neck in complete trust. Scars crossed his collarbone, one long pale seam running toward his shoulder, where some old blade had nearly ended him. Valentina felt her wolf go still with awe. He lowered his chin again and waited. She nodded. He leaned in slowly, slow enough that she could stop him, slow enough that every nerve in her body lit in anticipation. His mouth brushed the side of her neck first, warm and open, a reverent touch that made her shiver hard. Then his canines pressed at the pulse point between neck and shoulder. Pain came sharp, bright, immediate, a clean puncture that arced through her like lightning. She gasped and grabbed his shoulders. For one heartbeat, it was only pain. Then the bond ripped open. Heat flooded the bite, transforming burn into molten pleasure that poured down her spine and outward into every limb. Her wolf surged up with a cry that was half feral, half joy. Sense exploded vivid. Cedar, iron, rain, moonstone dust, his skin, his blood, her own. And beneath them all, the wild, clean note of belonging. Theron groaned against her throat, hands fisting in her cloak as if anchoring himself while power moved through both of them. She felt his emotions slam into her in clear waves now, fierce protectiveness, aching gratitude, hunger, the old loneliness cracking apart. He eased his teeth free and pressed his mouth over the mark, soothing. The wound throbbed once, twice, then settled into a hot brand that pulsed with her heartbeat. Valentina was shaking. "Too much?" he asked instantly, pulling back, voice hoarse with concern. She laughed breathlessly and cupped his face. "Not enough." His answering smile was wrecked and radiant. "My turn," she murmured. Theron stilled, then bowed his head, exposing that scarred line above his collarbone. He did not brace. He trusted. Valentina leaned in and tasted salt and heat where her lips met his skin. She let her teeth graze first, a warning, a promise. His breath caught. His hands slid to her waist, steady but trembling. "Ready?" she whispered against him. "Yours," he said. She bit. His body jerked under her hands, a low sound torn from his chest, more vulnerable than any roar in the hall. Blood, copper-rich, touched her tongue, and with it another surge through the bond, this one deeper, wider, less lightning and more tide. Pain flashed through him and into her, then melted, turning to a fierce, almost aching pleasure that threaded their cores together. Images flickered at the edge of her vision. Him as a younger alpha on a ridge at dawn. Him in chains counting breaths in the dark. Him seeing her at the sanctum door and believing for one impossible second that fate might still be kind. She let go, licked the wound closed by instinct, and rested her forehead to his. Twin crescents burned under their skin, then cooled into matching scars. "Mine," she whispered. His hands came up to frame her face. "Yours." Together, breath mingling, wolves quiet and full for the first time, they said, "Mate." The chapel seemed to exhale with them. The last jagged edges in the bond settled, not weaker, but integrated, like storm water finding its riverbed after flood. Valentina curled into him and he wrapped her close, cloak and bandages and all, holding her as dawn climbed the broken stone. They stayed like that for a long time, listening to each other breathe, feeling each pulse answer the other without fear. When she finally lifted her head, he brushed his thumb over the fresh mark at her neck. "Chosen," he said. She touched the mark above his collarbone. "Not traded." Their voices met, quiet and absolute. Never again. By noon, the great court was full again, but this time no callers waited on silver trays. Valentina stood at Theron's right before the moonstone dais, her cloak pinned with both Nightvale Crescent and Stormborn Lightning. The new mark at her neck was visible by design. So was his. The silver-haired counselor struck her staff to the floor. "By witness of challenge and binding law, we ratify Valentina Stormborn, recognized mate to Alpha King Theron Valewood, is invested Luna Queen of Nightvale and sworn envoy plenipotentiary to Stormborn." No one called her tribute. No one said property. Theron took her hand, not lifting it as display, just linking fingers. "First decree," he said, voice carrying. "All tribute marriage contracts between pacts are void. Any alliance requiring bonded surrender of daughters or sons is unlawful from this moon forward." A ripple of stunned silence, then scattered thumps of fists to chests from younger wolves in the back rows. Valentina stepped forward and added, "Second, border pacts harmed by old tribute levies may petition restitution through joint council. Not charity. Repair." Brecken, pale and chastened, rose with his slinged arm and bowed stiffly. I submit claim and apology, he said, eyes on the floor. For collaring language and assault in hall, I accept censure. Theron's jaw tightened. Censure granted. You keep your lands under probation. One more violation and your ash waste patrol until your bones give out. Brecken swallowed. Understood. At a signal from the council, guards carried in the remaining celestial hardware seized from the catacombs, light-forged rings, rune stakes, locking tablets. In full view of court and clergy, blacksmiths from both packs hammered them apart on an anvil set in the center aisle. Each strike rang bright and final. The high priest, stripped of saffron authority but not of voice, stepped forward with shaking hands. The temple acknowledges unlawful collusion. We submit our records to joint audit. Do that, Valentina said, and open your dormitories. No more hidden novices moved as bargaining stock. He bowed lower. By sunset, she and Theron walked the border terrace where she had entered in chains days ago. Now no shackles, just wind off the pines and wet stone underfoot. Below, runners carried signed copies of the rewritten treaty to both territories. Equal alliance, shared patrols, grain relief through winter, and a newly formed council with seats reserved for lesser packs who had never before been allowed a vote. Theron glanced at her, mouth curving. You realize half the old guard thinks we've gone soft? Valentina leaned into his shoulder as they walked. Good. Let them underestimate policy. He laughed, the sound unbroken for the first time. Prophecy said I'd unite the realm through conquest. She squeezed his hand. Then we redefine conquest. He stopped at the parapet and drew her in, forehead to forehead, dusk painting his scars silver. In the courtyard below, wolves from both sides trained together under torchlight, awkward and wary and trying anyway. No one could be sold here now. Not by treaty, not by decree, not by anyone who wanted to keep their title. Valentina breathed cedar, iron, storm rain, and home. Ready, Luna Queen? Theron murmured. She smiled, fierce and certain. Ready, my king. They went back inside side by side, marked, mated, and very much alive.